everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep into mental strength today.
Ooh, I like that.
We all want it right, especially when things get tough.
For sure.
And we've got just the thing to help us unpack it all. Amy Morin's book, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. We've got excerpts ready to go.
Awesome.
I'm really hoping we can all learn some practical tools and mindsets to boost our resilience, no matter what life throws at us. What do you think?
I love that goal. And it's interesting you use the word elusive when you talk about mental strength.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not some magical thing you're born with, right?
No, I guess not.
It's more like a muscle you got to work out. And honestly, facing those tough times, that's the real gem.
I like that analogy.
It's what I find so interesting about Maureen's work.
Yeah.
She gets real. She's been through it.
Totally. Her own story is all over the book, and it's not your typical self-help fluff,
No, not at all.
She loses her mom suddenly, then becomes a widow super young. It's heavy stuff.
Really tough stuff. And it was going through all that grief that she started thinking, what makes someone mentally strong? It wasn't about pretending everything was fine.
Right.
It was figuring out the thing she was doing that kept her stuck and then actively choosing to do things differently.
So powerful. It's like reverse engineering resilience.
Exactly.
And one of the first things she tackles is this idea of overcoming self-pity. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we?
Oh, yeah. That woe is me feeling
Exactly.
all too familiar.
But Morin says that wallowing, that's dangerous. That keeps you stuck.
100%. And it's sneaky, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it feels like you're justified, life's unfair, why me, that sort of thing.
You feel like you have a right to complain.
But does that thinking ever really lead to something good?
Not usually.
It just makes you feel worse.
Totally. It's like getting stuck in a mental mud pit.
Perfect way to put it.
I remember this one time. Lost my job a few years back. Oh man, I spent weeks just feeling sorry for myself.
Oh, I've been there.
Like I was wearing a sign that said, "Kick me."
And that's it, right?
Yeah.
Self-pity makes you passive. Like you're giving up control to everything around you.
I see what you mean.
Morin talks about how Abraham Lincoln's family, they celebrated his 27th birthday. Now, Lincoln was already going through a lot of career stuff, relationship stuff, but they didn't dwell on the bad.
They didn't throw him a pity party.
Exactly.
I'll
They
be like,
celebrated him, his toughness, his potential. They chose to focus on the good, even when things were hard.
okay, that's a really interesting point. It's not about pretending things are perfect. It's about choosing where you put your attention.
Yes.
And Morin doesn't just say this. She's got research to back it up. I was reading this study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and it found that people who regularly practiced gratitude, well, they experienced more positive emotions.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they felt more energized, even slept better.
It's amazing how much power gratitude has.
Yeah.
It's not just about feeling good.
It's deeper than that.
It actually changes your brain over time.
Really?
When you focus on what you have, not what you're missing, you create these pathways, these neural pathways that made happiness and well-being easier.
So you're training your brain to find those silver linings even when it's stormy.
That's the idea.
Morin even has this incredible story about Marla Runyon.
Oh, yeah.
She's a legally blind Olympic athlete.
Wow. I didn't know that about her.
Instead of seeing her blindness as a limit, she saw it as a challenge.
I love that.
And it made her achievements even more amazing.
Think about that shift in thinking. Not what she couldn't do, but what she could do. And then she pushed even further.
It's like our minds really do shape our reality, don't they?
I think so, yeah.
So how do we ditch the self-pity and get to that stronger mindset?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Morin says, try asking yourself some specific questions when you feel that woe is me creeping in.
Like what?
Stuff like, what can I learn from this? Or what's one good thing that happened today? Simple stuff, but it can really break that negative spiral.
It's like hitting the reset button on your thoughts. You're not denying the bad, you're just getting some perspective.
And Morin reminds us, even in the tough times, there are always things to be grateful for, lessons to learn, strengths to find.
Definitely.
Okay, this is giving me a lot to think about, but before we get too lost in thought, let's move on to Morin's next principle. Retaining your power. This one sounds a bit more abstract,
It does a bit.
Yeah.
What does it really mean to retain your power?
It's about understanding you've got more control over your life than you might think.
Okay.
It's about not letting outside stuff, people, events, whatever, control how you feel. Warren uses this example of a woman named Lauren. She's dealing with a very overbearing mother-in-law, Jackie.
Ooh, the classic in-law situation.
Exactly. But how does this connect to power?
I'm not sure. Tell me more.
So Jackie is constantly in Lauren's business. Unsolicited advice, questioning her parenting, you name it.
Ugh, I can picture it.
At first, Lauren feels powerless. She vents to her friends about how awful Jackie is.
I think we've all been there.
But then she has this realization. All that complaining, that's actually giving Jackie more power.
Wait, how does that work?
The more energy Lauren spends on Jackie's behavior, the more control Jackie has
Over Lauren's life.
over her mood, her thoughts, her time. It's like Jackie's living rent-free in her head.
Wow, I see it now. The more you focus on someone else's bad behavior, the more they control you.
That's exactly it. And that's how we give away our power. It's often subtle. We blame outside stuff for our unhappiness, our stress, our lack of progress.
So instead of taking responsibility,
We say things like, my boss makes me miserable, or traffic ruined my day, when really it's our reaction to those things that's causing the real suffering.
so it's not pretending those things don't exist. It's realizing we have a choice in how we respond.
Yes.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this applies to so much. But what about situations where it really does feel like something outside yourself is causing you pain?
Like what?
Trauma, you know? Does Maureen talk about that?
She does, and she tells this story that's so sad, but also incredibly inspiring. It's about Officer Stephen McDonald, an NYPD officer.
Okay.
He was shot on the job and ended up paralyzed.
Oh, wow. That's terrible. I can't even imagine retaining your power in a situation like that.
Right. It seems impossible.
Yeah.
But that's what Officer McDonald did. Instead of giving in to anger and bitterness, he chose forgiveness.
Like,
He refused to let the shooter define him or steal his joy.
hmm?
He even became a speaker, advocating for peace and understanding.
That's incredible. It really shows that even when something awful happens, you still have the power to choose how you respond.
You always have a choice.
It makes me think about all the little ways I give away my power every day. Like someone cuts me off in traffic, and I let it ruin my whole morning.
And you're essentially letting that stranger control your mood.
It's like I'm handing them the steering wheel to my own emotions.
Exactly. And while it's normal to feel frustrated or angry at first, the key is to not let it take over.
It's about how long you stay in that negative headspace.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm seeing how these principles are all linked. Overcoming self-pity, retaining your power. It's all about owning your thoughts, feelings, and reactions, right?
You got it.
And that brings us to the next principle, embracing change. Now, this is a big one for me because change, it's just uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it.
Makes you step outside your routines and comfort zones.
And sometimes that can feel downright scary,
It's like trying to swim upstream.
exhausting, and you're getting nowhere.
Maureen says resisting change, it's like that.
It is. She talks about this guy named Richard. He knows he needs to get healthier diabetes risk and all that. But just the thought of it overwhelms him.
Ah, I feel that.
He's scared of the effort, the discomfort, the chance he might fail.
It's like when you know you need to clean out your closet, but it's so overwhelming, you just shut the door and hope it goes away.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And that's where Morin's approach is so useful.
What does she suggest?
She's all about breaking those big changes into smaller, easier steps.
Okay, that makes sense. Smaller bites.
So instead of Richard overhauling his whole diet at once, maybe he starts by switching out soda for water.
Or instead of an hour at the gym, he starts with a 20-minute walk a few times a week.
You got it. It's
Yep.
about those small wins, that momentum.
Change feels less like a giant leap and more like doable steps.
And she also says to try listing out the pros and cons of changing versus staying the same.
Oh, interesting.
Helps you see the potential good and bad, so you're making a real decision, not just reacting out of fear.
So you're thinking it through instead of just being emotional about it.
You got it.
But what about those times when the fear is valid?
Like what?
What if the change is risky, like quitting your job to start a business? How do you know when to push through the fear and when to listen to your gut and back off?
Great question. That's something Morin talks about with this woman named Mary Deming. And, well, Mary's story is really something. She shows how someone can not just go through change, but use it to do good. This woman, she lost both her parents, had a bad car accident, and then gets diagnosed with breast cancer.
It's like one thing after another.
I know, right? But she didn't let it break her. Instead, she focused on helping others.
That's amazing.
She started this breast cancer charity, ended up making a real difference in her community.
Wow. It's like turning all that pain into something beautiful, something with purpose. But it didn't happen overnight, did it?
No, of course not.
It seems like it started with her just focusing on what she could do, what she could control.
Exactly. That's the key thing here. We think of change as this huge all-or-nothing thing.
Yeah, it feels really big.
But often it's a bunch of little choices, building up over time.
Like little by little.
It's changing your thinking from, I can't, to how can I?
I love that. Finding that strength inside to keep going, even when it's scary.
That's what it's all about.
But I'm wondering about the flip side of this embracing change idea. What about letting go of the past? I know Morin talks about not dwelling on things you can't change, right?
She does, and it's so important because it's easy to get stuck in that woulda, coulda, shoulda thinking.
Oh, tell me about it.
Replaying old stuff, thinking about what you could have done different, like you can somehow change history.
Ugh. I used to be the queen of that. Replay awkward conversations in my head, cringe at every word I said.
Oh, no.
But it just made me feel worse, you know?
Oh,
Kept me from moving on.
that's exactly what dwelling does. It traps you in regret and shame.
And it takes so much energy.
It does. Keeps you from living in the present moment.
It's like dragging around a suitcase full of old baggage.
I love that image.
Weighs you down, right? Morin does say it can be good to think about the past, though. Like, how are you supposed to learn from your mistakes if you don't think about them at all?
That's a good point. And Morin's clear that there's a difference between dwelling and learning.
So what's the difference?
Dwelling is all about stewing in those negative feelings with a lot of judgment.
Okay.
Learning, that's about really looking at what happened, seeing what you can learn, and using that to make better choices next time.
So it's like thinking about it clearly without all the emotional baggage.
That's a great way to put it.
But how do you actually do that? Letting go of old hurts, especially when other people are involved. It's hard.
It really can be. That's where forgiveness comes in. Morin says forgiving someone, it doesn't mean saying what they did was okay.
Right.
It's about letting go of that anger and resentment you're carrying, because that's only hurting you.
It's true. There's that saying, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It just doesn't work.
Exactly.
But forgiveness, it's hard to actually, do it. Any tips?
Morin says, first, you got to acknowledge the hurt, feel those feelings, and then try to understand.
Not excuse their behavior, but try to see their side of things.
Yeah, that can lead to compassion, which is often the first step to letting go.
Okay, that's a good starting point. And I think it connects back to that idea of retaining your power, doesn't it?
How so?
When you hold on to anger, you're letting those past experiences, those people, control how you feel.
You're right. It's taking back that control, choosing to be free from the past so you can move forward.
So you can move on with peace.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about overcoming self-pity, retaining your power, embracing change, letting go of the past. But what about when you mess up? When you make mistakes and just want to beat yourself up?
That's a perfect segue to Morin's next principle. Not repeating the same mistakes. It's all about self-awareness.
Oh, I'm not good at that. I feel like I make the same mistakes over and over, and I can't figure out how to stop.
We've all been there.
I remember when I was learning to drive stick shift.
Oh, that can be tough.
It was a disaster. Stalling at every stoplight, grinding those gears.
I can hear it now.
My poor dad trying to teach me. He was a saint, but I just kept making the same mistakes.
It's so frustrating when that happens.
You feel like you should be learning, but you're stuck in this loop.
You're not alone in that feeling.
So how do you actually break free? How do you go from, oops, I did it again, to, okay, I learned, let's do this differently?
Morin says, have a written plan. Sounds simple, but it's about knowing what triggers those mistakes, what those warning signs are,
So you can catch yourself
and then having some strategies to change the pattern.
like a fire escape plan for your mind.
Exactly.
But what about bigger mistakes? Not just stalling a car, but choices that affect your job or relationships, things with bigger consequences.
Morin uses the example of Christy. She keeps yelling at her kids.
Oh, no.
She knows it doesn't work. She feels terrible afterwards, but she can't stop.
I know some parents who struggle with that.
And this is where Morin says it's important to find the root of the problem. Not just stop the yelling, but figure out why it's happening.
So what's causing it?
Is it stress? Tiredness? Feeling overwhelmed? You got to address that root cause.
We're treating the infection, not just the symptom.
Perfect analogy.
But sometimes it feels like you keep making the same mistakes even when you think you've learned, like choosing the wrong partner or making bad money decisions.
Those are tough ones. They often come from deeper emotional needs, maybe things from your past that haven't been dealt with. But Morin says every mistake is a chance to grow,
Even the big ones.
especially the big ones. It's a chance to understand yourself better, your patterns, your blind spots. And she tells these incredible stories about how learning from mistakes can actually lead to huge success.
Okay, let's hear them. I need some inspiration.
She talks about Roland Macy, the founder of Macy's,
Oh, the department store.
the one and only. But get this, before he hit it big, he had tons of business failures. Shops going bankrupt, merchandise literally sinking on a ship. His first Thanksgiving Day parade was a total flop.
A flop.
It was in the summer, and nobody showed up.
Wow. I guess even the biggest names had to start somewhere.
They did. And what's great about Macy is he didn't let those failures define him. He learned from them.
He turned those lemons into lemonade.
He took every setback and used it to get better.
It's like he was A/B testing his way to success. But it's not just about figuring out what went wrong, it's about having the guts to keep going.
Yes, to keep trying and refining your approach.
I like that.
She also talks about Milton Hershey, the chocolate guy.
Hershey's chocolate.
Yep. You'd think it was all smooth sailing, right? But he had so many setbacks. Financial ruin, having to mortgage his stuff to keep going.
Wow, so those Hershey's kisses were hard-earned. What made him different? Why did he succeed when others didn't?
Learning from mistakes was key. Each failure, each financial crisis taught him something valuable about the industry, the market, even his own strengths and weaknesses.
He was leveling up with every challenge. It shows that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the journey.
That's a great way to look at it.
Okay, I'm feeling motivated. What else does Morin have for us on this mental strength journey?
This next one's about something I think we all struggle with. Not resenting other people's success.
Ooh, yeah, that's tough. It's so easy to feel that little pang of envy when you see someone else living their dream while you're still figuring things out. Social media doesn't help with that.
It really doesn't.
But
But comparing yourself to others, that's a recipe for unhappiness. Teddy Roosevelt had it right. Comparison is the thief of joy.
that's so true.
And Morin says resentment is like a poison. It eats away at you and stops you from focusing on your own path.
Like you're too busy looking at someone else's green grass to water your own.
Exactly. So how do you fight those feelings of resentment? How do you celebrate someone else's win without feeling bad about yourself?
That's the question, isn't it?
Morin says focus on your own definition of success. Comparing yourself to others, that's a trap.
So run your own race. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses.
Exactly. But how do you define your own success?
Right. It's easy to say don't compare, but what do you compare to?
Morin says ask yourself some questions. What are your values? What are you passionate about? What makes you happy? Those answers can help you map out a life that feels good no matter what anyone else is doing.
Okay, so figure out what matters to you, not what everyone else is telling you should matter.
Yes. Create your own version of success.
I like that. What else?
She also talks about the power of supporting other people's achievements. Celebrating someone else's success, it doesn't take away from yours.
It's not a competition.
It can actually inspire you to do even greater things.
I love that. There's enough success to go around.
Exactly. And to show this, she tells the story of Herb Brooks.
Who's Herb Brooks?
He was the coach of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team, the team that pulled off the miracle on ice, beating the Soviets.
Oh, wow. I remember hearing about that. What does he have to do with not resenting other people's success?
Well, years before that, Brooks was a player, really talented, but he got cut from the Olympic team a week before the games.
Oh, that's rough.
I know. But instead of getting bitter, he congratulated the coach and wished his teammates luck. And guess what? They won gold.
Wow.
Then years later, as a coach, he always talked about teamwork, humility, supporting each other. He knew that a team is only as strong as its weakest link.
He sounds like a great leader. He could have been so resentful, but instead he used his experience to inspire others.
And that's the power of mental strength. It lets you turn negative things into positive ones.
That's really inspiring. All right, I'm adding Herb Brooks to my list of mental strength role models. What's next?
This one is about persistence. Not giving up after the first failure.
We all need that one. We've all had those moments where we just wanted to quit. How do you keep going when it gets tough?
Morin says self-compassion is key. Be kind to yourself, especially when you mess up. That's how you build resilience.
So be your own cheerleader, not your own worst critic.
Yes. But isn't there a danger of being too easy on yourself? Where's the line between self-compassion and just making excuses?
That's a good point.
Morin talks about that. She says there's a difference between being too hard and too easy on yourself. Too hard leads to shame and feeling inadequate. Too easy, you get complacent.
You don't push yourself.
Exactly.
Huh.
Self-compassion, it finds that balance.
So be honest about your mistakes, but don't beat yourself up about them.
Yeah, acknowledge you're human. You're going to mess up sometimes. It's okay.
It's about giving yourself permission to be imperfect.
And research shows this works. Self-compassion actually makes you more motivated to improve.
That's so cool. Being kind to yourself actually makes you stronger.
It does.
Okay, this is great stuff. What else does Morin have to say about building mental strength?
Well, this next one might surprise you. not fearing alone time.
Oh, interesting. Everyone seems scared to be alone with their thoughts these days. Why is solitude so important?
Morin says being alone gives you time to reflect, look inward, discover yourself.
Okay.
It's a chance to recharge, process your emotions, connect with yourself. It's like hitting pause on all the noise and chaos of life.
It does sound kind of peaceful, but honestly, I'm someone who always has to be doing something. Working, socializing, reading, listening to podcasts, just sitting in silence with my thoughts. That sounds kind of scary.
I get it. Morin talks about a woman named Vanessa who's afraid of quiet time because she gets racing thoughts. So
Yeah.
she tries to drown them out with activities, but that just backfires.
Makes her more anxious.
Exactly, and exhausted.
Sometimes the more I try to ignore my thoughts, the louder they get. It's like trying to ignore a dripping faucet eventually. It drives you crazy.
That's a great way to put it. And Vanessa realizes her fear of being alone comes from a fear of failure. She's scared of what her thoughts will tell her about herself.
She's afraid to face her own self-judgment.
Right. So it's not being alone that's scary. It's that potential for self-sabotage.
So how does she learn to embrace being alone?
Morin tells her to start small. A few minutes of quiet time each day instead of a whole hour of meditation.
Baby steps.
She starts turning down the background noise in her life. PV, phone, all that. It's about easing into it.
Like getting used to a new climate? Slowly.
That's a great analogy. But does this actually work? Does slowly getting used to solitude lead to real change?
That's what I want to know.
It does. Morin talks about Alicia. She has this sudden episode of something called transient global amnesia.
What's that?
It's rare. Causes temporary memory loss, usually triggered by stress.
That sounds scary.
It is scary, but for Alicia, it's a wake-up call.
How so?
She was so busy she totally neglected her own well-being. This amnesia forced her to slow down.
Her body was saying, enough is enough.
That's a great way to put it. And afterwards, she starts making time for quiet, doing things she enjoys, like walking her dog, gardening. And she gets better at paying attention to her thoughts and feelings without judging them.
So being alone wasn't about escaping the world. It was about connecting with herself.
Yes. And Morin says that solitude, when you do it right, is really good for your mental and physical health. Reduces stress, improves sleep, boosts creativity, even helps your immune system.
Wow. So it's not selfish, it's self-care.
Exactly. And it helps you build mental strength because you tap into your own inner resources, become more self-aware, find that inner peace.
Okay, I'm adding schedule more alone time to my list. What's next?
This one's about a trap a lot of people fall into, feeling like the world owes you something.
Oh, yeah, the entitlement trap.
We live in a culture where it's all about me, 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 feeling like you deserve special treatment, like you should get what you want when you want it.
But Marin says that attitude will backfire on you.
Absolutely. It leads to resentment, makes you feel like a victim, stops you from taking responsibility.
Like you're waiting for someone to just hand you a trophy for showing up.
And that never happens. You got to earn those wins.
That's for sure. But there are different kinds of entitlement, right?
There are. Morin talks about the kind that comes from feeling superior, like you're better than everyone else.
Okay.
And then there's the kind that comes from feeling like you've been wronged, like life's been unfair, so you deserve something to make up for it.
So one is about being above the rules. The other is about feeling cheated by them.
That's a great way to put it. But they both focus outward on someone else being responsible for your happiness.
Instead of looking inward.
Right. Morin talks about Jean Twenge. She's a psychologist who studied how entitlement and narcissism are changing over generations.
Oh, interesting. What did she find?
Her research shows these traits are on the rise, especially among younger people.
I wonder if social media plays a role in that. Everyone's always showing off their perfect life.
I think it definitely does. It makes you feel like you need to have it all, be successful quickly, without any effort. And when that doesn't happen, it's easy to feel entitled, like you've been cheated.
That makes sense. And this connects back to Marin's earlier points, right? If you're stuck in self-pity, it's easy to feel like the world owes you something. Or if you haven't learned to take control of your own power, you're more likely to blame others for your problems and feel resentful of people who seem to have it all figured out.
Exactly. It's all connected.
It's like a web.
But what I like about Morin is she doesn't just point out the problem, she gives you solutions. She says focus on giving, not taking. Practice gratitude, humility, contribute to something bigger than yourself.
So shift from what can I get to what can I give. It's about finding fulfillment through connection and making a difference.
Right. And she tells this incredible story about Sarah Robinson, who was diagnosed with a brain tumor at 24.
Oh, wow, that's so young.
I know. And while she's going through treatment, she sees all these other cancer patients struggling. People traveling for care, families struggling financially and emotionally.
So even while battling cancer, she's thinking about others.
She is. And instead of feeling sorry for herself, she decides to do something. She starts this nonprofit called Sarah's House.
What does it do?
It provides housing and support for cancer patients and their families.
That's amazing. Even while facing her own challenges, she chooses to focus on giving back.
And she never complains, never feels like the world owes her anything. She's just grateful and determined to make the most of her time.
Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, we can choose to focus on the good. We can make a difference.
We can leave the world a little better than we found it.
Okay, I'm feeling really inspired. What's next?
This one is about patience, not expecting immediate results.
That's a tough one. We want everything now, don't we? We're so used to instant gratification.
We are. Think about it. Instant information, instant entertainment, stuff delivered to your door in a couple of hours.
It's true. We want it all, and we want it now. But how does that affect our goals and personal growth?
It makes you set unrealistic expectations. You make impulsive choices. Give up too easy when you don't see results right away.
You don't give things time to work.
It's like planting a seed and digging it up every day to see if it's sprouted.
Impatient gardener.
You're so focused on the end result that you don't let the process happen.
And I think social media makes it worse, Everyone's showing off their success, making it seem like they got there overnight.
Oh, definitely. It makes you feel like you're falling behind. It makes you impatient.
But Marin reminds us that real growth takes time. It takes effort. It's about the journey, not just the destination.
She's right about that.
And she says that needing everything right now can actually make us do things that hurt us in the long run.
Like what?
Well, think about those crash diets.
Oh, yeah. Lose 10 pounds in a week.
They might work for a bit, but they're not healthy. They're not sustainable.
It's like trying to get rich quick with some shady scheme. Might seem good at the time, but it'll probably backfire.
That's a good way to put it. So patience is key.
Morin says it's essential for mental strength. It helps you stick with your goals, get through the tough stuff, and not make those rash decisions that could mess things up in the long run.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've covered so much, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. What are some final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
It's true. We could talk about this stuff for days.
There's so much to unpack. Read.
But I think that's a good thing. Mental strength, it's not a finish line you cross. It's a journey.
Yeah, it's like you're always learning, always growing, always becoming more resilient.
And I think it's important to remember, it's not about becoming some emotionless robot.
No, not at all.
It's not about pretending you're not feeling anything or that everything's fine when it's not.
It's not about putting on a brave face and pretending everything is okay when it's not, right?
Exactly. It's about being real with yourself. Acknowledge what you're feeling, let yourself experience those emotions, and then decide how you want to respond.
So you're not suppressing your emotions, you're choosing how to deal with them.
Yes. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to say, hey, I'm not perfect, to ask for help when you need it.
So true. True strength isn't about being perfect, it's about being authentic.
I think that's a really important point.
And we all have that capacity for mental strength, don't we?
We do. It's not just for a special few. It's a skill anyone can learn with practice and commitment.
Like a muscle you can train.
That's a great way to put it.
Of everything we talked about today, what really stands out to you? What's essential?
That's a tough one. They're all so important, and they all kind of work together. But if I had to pick a few,
Okay.
overcoming self-pity, that's huge. It's about realizing that negativity will keep you stuck.
It's about switching from woe is me to what can I do about this?
Yes, taking back control, believing you can make things better.
And I think retaining your power goes right along with that. Realizing you have more control over your thoughts and feelings than you think.
Definitely. Not letting the outside world dictate how you feel inside.
Becoming the boss of your own mind, right? Choosing how you react to things. Oh, and we can't forget embracing change.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's understanding that change is going to happen, and fighting it just makes things harder.
It's learning to go with the flow, to see change as a chance to grow.
Like becoming a mental strength gymnast.
I love that. Flexible and adaptable, ready for anything.
Okay, those are some great takeaways. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. How can you take even just one of these ideas and apply it to something you're facing right now? A challenge, a goal, anything.
Maybe it's about letting go of self-pity and focusing on what you're grateful for. Or maybe it's about setting boundaries in a relationship to take back your power. Or maybe it's about taking a chance, embracing a change that could lead to something better.
Whatever it is, think about what resonated with you today. Pick one principle and really commit to trying it out.
Remember, mental strength is a journey. Keep showing up for yourself, making those little choices that add up to a more resilient, more fulfilling life.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel inspired to build your own mental strength one step at a time.